All right. Well, hello and welcome to this very special November 2025 event, Be in the Know, Breaking Barriers in Pain Research. I'm Nicole Hemingway, CEO of the US Pain Foundation, and I am so excited to be here today for this very candid conversation. So before we begin, here's a quick look at what's ahead. We'll kick things off with an overview of this year's November focus, which is no research. And then we will talk with Burel Goodin, a pain researcher and the president of the US Association for the Study of Pain. Just a quick few housekeeping notes before we begin. Today's session is educational only. The perspectives shared are those of our guests and may not reflect the views of their institutions or those of US Pain Foundation. As always, we do not promote or endorse any specific treatments, therapies, or products. If you'd like to ask a question, please submit it at any time using the Q&A feature that's at the bottom of your screen, and we are going to try to answer as many as possible during our conversation. And finally, we are recording today's event, so the replay will be available on our website for anyone who wants to revisit it or share it with others. We also want to extend a very special thank you to our sponsors. While the US Pain Foundation independently develops all of its programs and educational content, we're incredibly grateful for the generous support that makes this work possible. So thank you to Vertex Pharmaceuticals, our platinum sponsor, and Eli Lilly, our silver sponsor, for supporting our November campaign. Each November, our November campaign puts a spotlight on a topic that matters deeply to our community. And this year, we're zeroing in on pain research. So what it is, why it matters, and how we can strengthen it by centering lived experience every step of the way. With no research, our goal is simple: help people understand how research actually works, where the system still isn't working, and how each of us has a role to play in pushing it forward. We want research to feel less like something happening behind closed doors and more like something connected to real people's lives and experiences. So let's dive in just a little bit further on some of the things that we're doing this month. We have put together a bunch of helpful resources for November. You can dive into our latest articles, download the new 2025 Pain Research Survey Insight, that was a tongue twister for me, which gives an interesting snapshot of how individuals with pain really perceive pain science. And you can also watch short videos from pain researchers about why they do this work and what they're studying right now. All of that is in one place at uspainfoundation.org/November/no research. And I know that that was a lot. So if you just go to uspainfoundation.org, a pop-up will hit you right up on the front of the screen and you'll be able to connect right away. And again, if you want to stay involved, there are other ways that are really easy to help keep this conversation going. Share any of the materials with your friends, providers, or community, or even hop on social media and join the discussion, because every like, comment, or share using the hashtags #NoResearch and November truly helps amplify these messages. So earlier this week, we hosted our first November webinar, Be in the Know, Pain Research Then, Now, and Next. And we wanted to make sure that if you missed it or would like to revisit the conversation, the full recording is now available on our website. We also broke the webinar into short, easy to watch clips so you can explore the topics that matter most to you or share them with your community. You'll find segments on how pain research has evolved over time, where traditional research models have fallen short, and how the NIH HEAL K-12 program is bridging people with lived experience into research teams. You also can see an inside look at the NIH Engage initiative and its focus on public and patient engagement. And finally, you can see how advocates can keep pain research a national priority. One thing we have heard clearly from our community is the interest in staying informed about future opportunities. So US Pain, as well as USASP, are working together to better understand how we can support people with lived experience who want to get involved in pain research. If that's you, we'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to fill out a short form. You can access it through this QR code, or you also can find the link on our website. It's really going to help us learn what kind of support, training, or opportunities would be most helpful. And it allows us to connect with you and with research in ways that feel meaningful and empowering to you. And then finally, to build out on everything we're sharing through November, I also want to encourage you to dive into the newest edition of the Invisible Project magazine, which is dedicated entirely to pain research. This issue shines a light on real people living with pain who have taken part in research and what their experiences were like. And it also has clear, accessible articles that unpack topics like what an institutional review board actually does, how different types of studies work, and practical ways people with lived experience can reshape research as true partners. You can read the magazine online. You can use the QR codes inside each article and profile to share individual stories with friends and family. And you can even request free print copies if you prefer something tangible and would like to pass it on to others. Now I am thrilled to welcome today's guest, somebody who is working to help reshape how we think about and also conduct pain research. Dr. Goodin brings a powerful blend of scientific leadership, deep community engagement, and a commitment to making pain research more inclusive and meaningful. So I'm truly grateful he's joining us today for this conversational, informal Q&A, where we will explore his insights, experiences, and hopes for the future of the field. So before we jump into the conversation, I really want to take a moment to highlight Dr. Goodin's background. So Dr. Burel Goodin is a professor of anesthesiology at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis, and he currently serves as the president of the U.S. Association for the Study of Pain. His career brings together cutting-edge translational pain science with a deep commitment to equity, mentorship, and community engagement. One of the things that truly sets his work apart is how he blends rigorous laboratory methods with an awareness of the social and cultural factors that shape real-world pain experiences. He is also widely recognized for his leadership in the field, sustained research funding, and for being an exceptional mentor to emerging scientists. We are so grateful to have him here. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Dr. Goodin, hello. We are so excited to just get to have this conversation with you. There we are. It's so great to see you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So I think let's just start at the beginning. What really first drew you into the field of pain research, and what continues to motivate your work today?
Sure. Well, I would like to tell you, Nicole, that it was all by design, and perhaps it was. It just wasn't my design. A lot of it just sort of happened with a hope and a prayer, and things sort of happened organically, I guess. I went to college and actually played football in college at a small school. And, some of the things that I first started to see and appreciate were that, some of the teammates might have an injury, and it might be a very comparable injury, but their experiences of that injury in terms of pain and recovery could be very different. So I was wondering, why might that be? And, over time, maybe there's some biology involved in terms of just how our immune system helps us recover, some psychology in terms of how people approach pain and cope with it. And then once I graduated college, that led me down a path of more schooling to really refine my understanding and education around that topic. At the time, I just wanted to get out of the Midwest as well and go see some country. So I was pretty much up for wherever the journey may take me. So I left Illinois at the time and went to Massachusetts for a while and Maryland. From Maryland back up to Connecticut, down to Florida. From Florida to Alabama, and from Alabama back up to Missouri now. And it's been fun, but now I'm getting kind of old and kind of tired, and I've got a small family, so I'm happy to just be settled where I am, trying to do my best now to take all the knowledge accumulated around pain, who develops it and why, how best we might treat it, and apply that locally to my brothers and sisters in St. Louis, but then ideally to the broader community throughout the country and frankly throughout the world, because chronic pain is not something that just happens to Americans. It happens to everybody in every continent on the planet.
Well, thank you. So for those that might be newer to the space, can you share a little bit more about USASP and its mission and how you see the organization's role evolving, especially when it comes to connecting maybe the scientists, providers, and people with lived experience?
Yeah. So thank you for that question. So I guess in short, right, the United States Association for the Study of Pain has one overarching goal, which is to promote research to reduce the burden of pain. This is a lovely slide. I really do like this. Thank you, Janelle Letson, for such a lovely slide. It helps me to not just have to make stuff up as I go along. So as you can see there, we really want to take research and science and find ways to bring this to the people in ways that are meaningful to them, in a way, basically meaning that we want to help reduce their burden and help take care of their pain, right? Easier said than done, but that is our aspirational goal. And then the one that we work towards every day to help actualize. With USASP, the majority of our members are comprised of people who are investigators and researchers in universities, hospitals, some in the biotech or maybe more private industry. But as well as that, we have people at federal agencies and beyond, like so the National Institutes of Health, that provides a lot of funding in the form of taxpayer investment to help us create health promoting sort of interventions and strategies that take care of all of us. Because as an American, one of our duties and our taxes is to put those to work for us in ways that will hopefully translate into better health for all of us. And then people who actually are in the trenches day to day meeting people living with chronic pain and trying to find treatment plans to meet their needs. Those are our pain care providers. And then perhaps a little bit of a newer focus. And I'm a bit ashamed to say it's a newer focus. It probably should have been there all along. But importantly, we've sort of caught up to the times, is actually bringing to the table people who are living with pain to say, hey, what do you think might be best for you, right? Because admittedly, I'm fortunate enough right now to not have to deal with a chronic pain condition, right? But I've experienced pain and I know that it doesn't take long for it to start to suck really bad, right? So how can we deal with that? But in ways that are meaningful to people dealing with it. I don't want to get stuck like thinking that I know something better than a person's own lived experience. And then what ends up happening is I go out and I give talks to other investigators and like, dang, Burel, great idea. You're so smart. Way to go. And I'm really starting to feel good about myself. And then I go and I talk to people who are living it and they're like, not even close, man. That hasn't been relevant for years. And then I get laughed out of the building. That's my actual deepest fear as it relates to doing this work. So the best way to mitigate that is to actually bring people to the table living it and pitch the ideas to them and then have them say like, yeah, this is cool, or no, not so much. And that's worked out brilliantly. There's been plenty of times, Nicole, where I've had to humble myself because, man, I really thought I was onto something and then was actually told, we don't think so. And I was like, well, okay, tell me what you think. And then sometimes like I've been met with a different idea and instantly I was like, oh yeah, that's much better. Or other times I'm like, I don't see it. Help me to understand why that's so meaningful. And then there's ongoing interesting talk around this, that, and the other. And then I'm like, oh, now it makes more sense. And turns out you didn't need a whole PhD in order to make sense out of that, right? So, all right, there you go.
That's odd. That's funny. Yeah.
Well, no, and again, I mean, good ideas pop up in all kinds of great places, right? So speaking of, right? Here's something that is a sort of podcast resource through USASP, right? We call it Ouch, talking about pain with USASP. And these are just like really organic sort of interviews that obviously are in the form of a podcast, where the whole point is to take experts and have them just talk about things in real world terminology around issues that are relevant to people and make it simple, right? Simple is key. Right? We get caught up in a lot of fancy words and concepts, but if the people that they're meant to engage aren't understanding them, then it's all for naught. So the whole point of the podcast is like, let's just keep it simple and have some real talk. That's what that is.
I think that's great. I loved when you were talking about how you are connecting more with people with lived experience and how through your own experiences you realize that maybe you had a brilliant idea and then when you brought it to the table and actually connected with individuals, maybe it needs to be shifted or tweaked just slightly to make it more um, engaging and really personal to the community that you're trying to help. So I had a question. Can you give us example of a time when input from the lived experience really maybe changed the design or direction of one of the studies or research that you were conducting?
Yeah, sure. Fantastic. So let me provide a little bit of context for that, right? It's not uncommon for universities like Washington University to have resources in place whereby people have already tried their best to engage community members, to
Yep.
establish panels, such that when somebody like me is like, I really feel like I should talk to the community about this, they're like, oh, wait, we got a panel for that, which is nice, right? And that makes it somewhat easier, but recognize that to do justice to the engagement piece, it's more than a checkbox. Sometimes a person like me actually has to be intentional about getting up out of my seat and coming out of my ivory tower, so to speak, and meeting folks where they're at, so out in the community. And sometimes that can be a little bit uncertain about, well, where would be a good place to go. And there's no one correct answer for that because it's a function of where you live and what your community is. And if you're trying to engage people rurally, maybe you need to go to a health department and try to talk to some people there, right? Or maybe you go to the local sort of doctor's office who sees a lot of back pain or knee pain in the primary care context and say, is there a way that I might be able to like engage folks here? And you can post a flyer or something, and maybe people will call you or whatever, right? Something like that. But at WashU not too long ago, I engaged one of these community panels that they already had sort of established. And I was thinking in my mind, if I recall this correctly, that part of an intervention I wanted to roll out was around this mindfulness-based stress reduction.
Mhm.
And mindfulness still pretty cool in all the circles I run in, and there's whole centers around contemplative science and mindfulness and all that good business. So I was like, yeah, mindfulness makes a lot of sense. And I brought that to the community, and they're like, man, if you try to like mindfulness us with one more freaking intervention, we're gonna lose our minds. Because like mindfulness is great, but it keeps sort of being shoved down our throats as the end all and be all of our pain, and we would like a little something different. So I appreciated that, and I was like, all right, well, mindfulness sounds like well, again, and I don't mean to undermine mindfulness, don't get me wrong, but everything new becomes old, right? So folks are like, all right, yeah, mindfulness, and if that's a component of what you're trying to roll out, fine. But if that's the end all and be all, folks are like, I got this very significant like back pain around this injury that I sustained, and I've been through the rigors of, maybe an
Right.
opioid medicine, and that has a whole host of trials and tribulations that go along with it as it relates to medicine itself, navigating the healthcare system. But then I tried this, that, and the other. And while like mindfulness maybe helps square me or sort of bring me back to focus with my stressful life, to think that like now all of a sudden my back pain's gone, give me something else. And I was like, all right, let's. So again, nothing against mindfulness, but we've gone in a different direction since receiving that bit of feedback. And I was like, all
Yeah.
right, well, and interestingly enough, Nicole, like a lot of times I'm doing things on timelines for like, say, a grant submission to the NIH, where I'm like, man, I really want to get this in shape. Like if it was right now, I'd be like, so I could submit this in February. But then
Right.
let's say I get some feedback, like, not this mindfulness stuff, Burl. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I have to be okay now. Like, I'm probably not going to make this February deadline, right? And I have to push it maybe to like the summer, like June. Sometimes, like, well, when I was just getting started, I'm like, time is very, very important. I don't know if I can push that deadline. So I'm going to go with it and hope for the best. And you make decisions around like, well, all right, I'm making the deadline, but am I actually undermining my effort by pushing something that I was directly told we don't necessarily
How many
want,
sorry.
right?
Right.
Versus like saying, no, no, I'm going to wait on it and kind of go back to the drawing board. Fortunately enough, now I'm in a position in my career where waiting on it is okay,
It's
right?
okay.
I got other stuff going, right? But there's all sorts for an investigator like myself, there's all sort of competing demands. But with that, I will still say that we need to elevate our community partners and our people with lived experience. Because again, I knew full well, like in order to make this deadline, I might be pushing something that people don't need. So then, I mean, and then to take it even a step further, even if the NIH is like, somehow I convinced them that this was great, and then they gave me the money, now I got to do it and I got to stand by this treatment that perhaps my people don't want.
Right.
Right? Like my brothers and sisters in pain are like, we don't want this. We're not going to participate in your study. And now everybody's in trouble, right?
Yes. Yes. Well, so I think it's great though that when you connect with individuals that have the experience behind them and you really listen to them, and in certain situations, in certain settings, it might not always be possible, but as many times as possible that you're taking into consideration and into account what their wants are, their needs, their goals.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So,
If I
yeah.
may,
Oh,
just real fast. So
yes, please.
my approach to getting this type of work done, this work being like pain science and research, is it takes a team. You want a whole team of people who have been educated in different ways, who have different world experiences and cultures that they came up in, because then you get a bunch of ideas that you may not have thought about as a way of approaching a problem, right? So you might call that diverse thinking and inclusive representation, which would you be led to believe right now that those are dirty words? They're not. It's just fine. Me for one, I'm going to keep doing it this way because it's proven to be very effective. That being said, right? So just like I might bring a new investigator to the table who's trained differently than me and does different sorts of techniques for pain management, I'm going to listen to what they have to say and take it seriously. So too would I do the same thing with a person with lived experience, because this is the team. And with any sort of team-based approach, sometimes you give, sometimes you take, right? There's compromises and negotiations to arrive at ideally something that everybody can live with, but ultimately with the end goal in mind of making something effective that people want, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, I just wanted
So
to push
no,
that.
I'm glad that, yes, please. Whatever you want to share, I'm very, very excited. Oh, let me just quickly, we have somebody here. Let's see, there we go. I want to take it back actually a step though right now, because a lot of times people hear the terms clinical trial or even research, and
Mm.
either they picture long forms, experimental medications, people in white coats looking at molecules under a lens. Can you kind of help break down what research actually looks like across different settings to help our community better understand what is it?
Sure, sure. So that's fantastic. And thank you, Janelle. Right on cue. We got some fantastic slides, right? So with pain research, but all
Yes.
research, there's often like three main types. So we have something that we might call basic science or preclinical science. And basically what that means is that things are being looked at and tests are being done, often with animals or cells, something that's being done outside of a human being, right? And
Yes.
that's often done to really sort of hone in on a particular cell or molecule or chemical process, um, in ways that are very sort of specific, but don't necessarily involve the human yet because they're not ready for prime time, and you don't want to hurt somebody by just jumping right into people with it, right? So this is how a lot of like biology and physiological research gets done, right? And again, for better or worse, whether you believe in animal testing or not, that's your belief. That's fine. I believe, right? Britt Knight, to all panelists, how do I? I'll come back to that, man. I got a lot to say about that, but let me stay focused here for a second.
Yeah.
Um, Animal testing, a lot of times, is how we prove different concepts might be biologically feasible, and that's the first step to then trying to translate it, which, if you may, right, to humans, right? Something that's done initially in like an animal model or sort of a non-human type of model that has potential has to be translated to people. And the very first step to translating it to people is all safety and tolerability to make sure that you don't inadvertently hurt somebody. Because again, we all sort of take that Hippocratic oath of like, do no harm. right? So safety profiles, this stuff is very, very serious, which is why this step of moving something translationally from a person, or excuse me, from an animal to a person often takes a lot of time, right?
Okay.
We want to be very deliberate to make sure that we're not hurting somebody. And if all of a sudden you do something to somebody and they grow a second head, you see that automatically and you're like, okay, probably don't want to do that. But sometimes like the negative effect could be insidious. So over the course of like a year of exposure to a treatment or something bad could happen. And so again, that's why it takes time. But from the translational piece does come the next step or the next type of research, which is your clinical or your human subjects work, right? And this is where clinical trials will come into play, where we are ultimately looking at an intervention of interest relative to perhaps some sort of control or comparison to see how those two perform, ultimately in terms of like hopefully providing relief and treating somebody's pain in a real world type of setting. So this brings us to the clinical trial, which I think maybe is the next slide.
Yes.
So fantastic, right?
Perfect.
So clinical trials, there's a lot of different types of clinical trials that fall underneath this umbrella. Sometimes there's just pure observational studies. I've done a lot of that work, right? Of really trying to appreciate what's happening just as a function of change over time, right? Behaviorally, what do habits look like? How do they form for better or worse, right? Really sort of a deep dive into people's lived experiences and then harnessing that knowledge to then ideally develop treatments that meet people where they're at based upon what their specific need profiles are. That's a whole sort of person-centric, personalized medicine. That's a buzzword that people might hear this day and age. But we want to roll that out in the form of a clinical trial. Does our intervention, one, affect a positive outcome? Does it do that better than placebo, which is basically the effect of placebo used to just be considered noise. Now it's actually just a beautiful brain at work. It's interestingly enough, I can tell people, Nicole, this is a sugar pill. It actually has no medicinal value, but please take it and know that you're cared for. I'm going to monitor you over the next year and hope that you do well. And chances are good you're going to do better. That's a whole nother talk, right? But placebo is interesting in clinical trials. But that's what these sort of studies are for. And then, Janelle, is there a slide around like the different phases of clinical trial? Man, here we go. Yes. So there's a whole sort of roadmap that, for better or worse, can take a long time because this is how things proceed. Recognize that part of things taking a long time is safety, right?
Right.
But there's also, again, this is America and American medicine, and there's also issues around how can we monetize this process? So that can also slow things down in terms of like, how do we bring something to market commercially and benefit from it? I wish we just had a bunch of Jonas Salks out there who could develop things and give it away for free, but unfortunately that ain't it. But anyways, my point is it often will start with basic science, animal models, things of that nature. Move to an early phase clinical trial, phase 1, small groups of people, safety, safety, safety. Phase 2 and 3, does it actually have efficacy, benefit for improving somebody's pain, how severe it is, and how much it interacts or with their day-to-day, right? So are we making things better, right? That's in larger groups. And then phase 4 is really like, can we scale it and bring it out to the masses? How does our intervention perform in the real world in clinics and hospitals across the country, right? That's generally how research in and of itself works, but particularly pain research as well.
That's fascinating. When you say that it takes a very long time, and I know that we hear this all the time, but it's something that our community, it's really, really challenging when you're waiting and hoping for some new development, some new advancement to come to be. Estimate the time frame from the beginning to the end.
Let's say for the sake of argument, it was like a new medicine, so some type of new pill.
Yes.
If we're literally talking about like discovering and designing a molecule that may work as the foundation for a treatment and bringing it all the way to market such that it's FDA approved for the treatment of pain, 15 to 20 years.
Okay. Yeah. So
Too long is the answer, right? All
yes,
is just way too long, right? I understand that there's a lot of regulation and quality assurance that has to go into the process to make sure that it's safe. But whatever it is, it's way too long. So while there's a big push in research and funding therein to develop new treatments and new medicines, people don't have 15 to 20 years to wait. So part of that also too is what do we currently have available that we might be able to tweak or combine or sort of roll out in a bit of a different way that can
right.
help people right now as we sort
As
of
we,
try to get to the promised land of the next class of medicines, so forth and so on. I mean, the fact of the matter is that we didn't do a very good job, right? I think to a certain extent, people sort of got caught lacking, for lack of a better term. They were investigators and society was resting on our haunches when the opioids came out because I think everybody thought, well, this is how we treat chronic pain and we're good, right? But as I just indicated around safety, sometimes it can take a while before the issues that really start to arise, right? So I'm not trying to
right.
vilify opioids and say there's no role for them. There certainly is, but everybody is
Okay.
aware of like opioids are no different than anything else in life. Moderation is usually the goal. A little, not enough is problematic, but too much can also be problematic, right? And it's like a pendulum. We're trying to hit the middle, but it swings a little too much in
Yeah.
one direction or the other. But the point being is that when opioids were having their heyday, I think it may have sort of stifled research into different treatments because we thought we
Mm.
sort of found the holy grail, so to speak. So now we're playing catch up because we realize that like opioids can be useful in certain circumstances, but it's not going to be this wonder drug that cures everybody, with no harmful side effects or what have you, right? So that's sort of
Right.
where we're at now is trying to catch up. And then the thing is too is that to think that there is one medicine that's going to treat all the different types of pain because it does this one thing very well, I don't subscribe to that. People's pain is very unique, just so much as people are unique. And that's
Yeah.
often going to require some amount of uniqueness to the treatments that we bring to them, which one is beautiful and interesting because people are uniquely beautiful and interesting, but it's just hard too because, I mean, the fact of the matter is like if you have diabetes, there's some medications that pretty much can do a good job of getting your A1C under control. And there you go. And you can bring that to the masses. The more sort of unique the condition, the unique the treatment for that condition, the longer it can take for any one person to get the relief they deserve. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I know from an organization standpoint, one of the things we always say is that there's no one treatment that's going to work for everyone. We're all so individualized. We need as
Mm-hmm.
many different tools in that toolbox as possible. Opioids are one of those tools for some people. It works very, very well. We want to make sure that people have access to it in an appropriate, safe manner, if that is what
Yes.
their provider and them think. But we need so many more options out there, and we need to start doing a lot more research into pain to make sure that more people have better health outcomes going forward. So I
Yes.
totally hear what you're saying. We do
Yes.
have a couple of questions from attendees, and one that I want to
Let's
ask first is, if you join a clinical trial, will you be told which phase you are going to be in?
Yes. So the phase of the research is generally made known to you, right? In terms of like what, yeah. So sorry, let me take a step back. So if somebody is interested in, say, participating in a clinical trial, but they've never actually participated in research before, and they're not
Right.
sure what it's all about, you might call somebody up, like like myself or somebody that works with me, and say, I'm interested. We'll say, fantastic, right? We have some eligibility criteria, right? Because there may be some things that we're specifically looking for this study. The individual who calls in may have some health conditions or things that maybe makes it a little too unsafe or risky to
Yeah.
participate. Again, safety above all else, right?
Right.
So, but if you're eligible, and it's something like a clinical trial, we may want to bring you in, but the very first thing we're going to do is have you complete what's called an informed consent, which means we're going to give you all the information you need to know about what you're signing up for. And then after we've given you that information and you've asked questions and we've done our best to answer them, you might say, this ain't for me. and you can get up and walk right out. We'll give you, 25, $50 for gas money to send you home. And that's your prerogative. Totally fine. If you're like, no, I'm interested, then we'll move forward. But yeah, we might let you know like the phase of the study, like, hey, this is really more of like an experimental proof of concept sort of thing.
Mhm.
We don't exactly know what's going to happen here. There you go. But if you're asking too, like, will we know what treatment we're being randomized to? The answer is maybe. So if it's a medicine, chances are good you won't know that, right? Because I won't even know that. The sugar pill and the actual medicine pill are made to look one and the same. So the reason why we don't necessarily tell you that is we're trying to minimize bias in knowing like, well, I got the placebo. This ain't going to work for me. And the mind is a powerful thing when it comes to expectations and outcomes therein, right? But let's
Right.
say we're doing some sort of behavioral trial, like I got one of these going, and we really want to try to help people sleep better as a way of maximizing their pain management. Well, it's a behavioral trial, right? Like chances are good you're going to know whether or not I'm trying to get you to sleep better versus just telling you about like cool science, right? So it's hard to
Right.
keep blinded as far as that goes, right? Um, so those are some of the just the methodological issues around doing the science around clinical trials. But the thing I want people to know out there in the audience is that, excuse me, and there might be a slide for this. I think it's slide 9, Janelle, if you don't mind. Um, is that there's all different kinds of treatments that are being tested out there, right? Some of them are medicines, some of them are behavioral, some of them are around brain stimulation, right? And I think, there we go.
It's
Sorry,
coming. There you
I
go.
wasn't trying to put you on there, but again, things around new technology. So the top left, there's ways that we might be able to stimulate the brain to activate or deactivate brain cells that are not necessarily doing what they're supposed to be doing as a way of helping people manage pain. So in the middle there is talk therapy. Some of that is around like helping people to better understand how to live their day to day with pain. So behavioral strategies, ways to cope and still try to derive as much benefit as possible out of life, even though pain is perhaps trying to suck all the fun and enjoyment out. There's still good quality life to be had. Some of it is around more like, old school Eastern medicine approaches, acupuncture, stuff like that. Sometimes it may be a little bit more interventional and might require a surgical approach, physical therapies, things around herbal medicine, right? I mean, there was a point where somebody said, what are you doing with that berry on that bush? And you know what happened to that berry? It turned out to be a cancer treatment that people use all the time now, right? So herbal medicines and Mother Nature unlocking a lot of secrets. There's value in exploring that, right? Even just lifestyle interventions of trying to help people better engage in an appropriate, nutritious diet, good quality sleep, as I mentioned, physical activity, right? Doesn't have to be marathons and ketogenic diets and, whatever bad sleep things there are. Just good quality stuff can help you maximize your life. So that's what, ongoing clinical trials are doing right now. And that's a lot of what I've got going in my lab right now, Nicole, stuff around these very topics.
All right. Well, talking about clinical trials, is there one myth about them that you wish we could bust once and for all? Just like burst it open?
Yes. And so I want to be very thoughtful around how I describe this as a myth, because what I'm about to say is steeped in a lot of history that actually supports how people might be thinking about clinical trials. But it's that idea of like you're going to come in and just be a guinea pig,
Yeah.
right? There's history, and you don't have to look too far back to see that that was actually sort of true, or not even sort of, that was true. And that was the approach that people incorporated, like people like me, right? Now, rest assured, not me, because even though those weren't my mistakes, I'm trying to learn from those mistakes and actually making sure that our field does better, right? But it's this idea of being an active participant or an active contributor to the clinical trial, right? You are not a guinea pig, right? You have agency. What that means is you have the ability, I mentioned informed consent. Just because you sign up for a study doesn't mean that you are tethered to it until the end. At any point, we'll let you know if this is no longer meeting your needs or you somehow feel like this is not a good use of your time, you're free to go, right? And we would encourage you to do so. Never want anybody to be stuck or feel that way, right? Relatedly, too, if somebody's in a study and they're like, well, I felt like I knew what we were trying to accomplish here, but now I'm not so sure what the hell's even happening anymore. Ask that question, because informed consent and your willingness to participate is an ongoing, involving thing, right? But we want people who come into our clinical trials to feel like they are like active participants, right? And the way I approach it and people may question this or say, well, not entirely, bro, but the way I approach it for my studies is that I need y'all more than you need me, right?
Yeah.
With then I respect your time, I respect your contributions, I respect the questions that you have, right? But the thing is, though, is that I do need you not only to like make sure that I can complete my clinical trial, but I need folks so I can learn to hopefully better understand what's happening and then bring that back out to people. So I want people to like take ownership as a participant to be like, well, this might be a way that I can contribute to, the field and helping people, something bigger than myself, so to speak, right? But that being said, I also want to make it worth your while. So I don't really do a clinical trial where we're, not paying people less than, I don't know, $600 or something like that, right? Because your time is valuable. It requires money, right? I've learned that, right? But that idea of like a person being a guinea pig that you just like poke and prod on, it's like, I have a question, bro, shut up, get back in there, right? Like that's not how it's going to be, right? Not at all. Not in my laboratory, not with the people that I train or bring up as like junior investigators. And frankly, not anybody, like if I hear about it, be like that for long because I'm going to call it out.
Well, good. I appreciate that. And I think it's one of the things that we do hear from our community as well is it is a lot of time and energy and commitment to participate in a trial. And there's so many barriers for them in order to participate. And so I love the fact that you even mentioned about being compensated. Every single person should be compensated for their time and being able to ask those questions if you need help with transportation and travel accommodations or what it might be, depending on where this trial is occurring. But another thing that we hear a lot from the community too is that it doesn't reflect my actual life. So how do we really balance that scientific rigor with also the complexity of what it really is to live with pain? Because most of the time it's not one condition we are living with, it is a whole host of comorbid conditions.
Yes. So thank you for that question. Janelle, if you would be so kind as to go to slide 14. So Nicole, to your question, like, to the extent that people are saying, well, this research, this trial does not reflect my life, right? Yes. Sorry, one more past this. I want you to come back to this. Sorry, I was working backwards to go forwards. Sorry. No, but no, I'm sorry. Slide 14, my friend. One more past this one.
But she'll come back.
And so part of like my brain not working linearly is I'm like here to there, here to there. Sorry. So slide 14, it's the co-design of research. Because again, how do we make research that actually reflects people's experiences and what they're going through? We co-design it with them, right? Like I would be naive and flat out stupid to think that like I'm an expert in people's lived experiences. Maybe I'm an expert in how to conduct a clinical trial. I mean, that's up to my peers to decide. I feel pretty confident in my ability to do that. But to then be so cocky and like off center is the thing that I know exactly what people need without really asking them, that's foolish. So how do we affect change to actually roll out studies and ultimately treatments that reflect people's lived experiences? That's right here, Nicole. We design it with them. We listen to what they have to say, right? Now, will this be the absolute like end all and be all of like touchdown pay dirt? Probably not, but this is a positive step in the right direction. Sorry, Janelle, if you would go to like 13 now, the slide that preceded this, right? so ultimately, we design something that people want and that they like. It is the one around barriers, Janelle. I'm sorry. I took you on a circuitous ride. I apologize. I owe you a coffee. But there's still going to be meaningful barriers for people, right? In terms of like, how can they engage research? So some of that would literally be like, man, I got to work and I can't justify like lost income to come and participate, right? So I sort of think about like, well, what does an hour of a person's time cost to ask them to come and spend it with me, right? And, I usually land around 50, 60 bucks, but then that's also dependent upon like, what am I asking them to do, right? If it's something that's somewhat burdensome or invasive, well, then the price needs to go up as far as I'm concerned, right? So paying for them, but some of that is paying for their time to get here, but gas is gas and that cost has gone up. So I pay for that. Or they're like, well, I don't have a car, so I don't require gas, but I still require transportation. Well, so, most people know about ride shares and Uber. Uber has an option called Uber Health, and we have an Uber Health account where we can basically send you an Uber, bring you back and forth, right? And we pay for that. So there's an example, right? One other thing, and sorry, I saw it on researchers aren't advertising, right? So part of like what I'm trying to do, and I know a lot of my colleagues are doing, is engaging with like the grassroots not-for-profits in people's communities to, basically say, hey, listen, do you mind if I post this flyer here? And then a lot of times what I'll do too is like, hey, tell me something that you're doing in the community. Can I contribute to that for the price of like, say, my time? Now we've got a nice sort of like mutually beneficial quid pro quo type of arrangement there. And now all of a sudden my adverts are hitting the community right where they want to be. Last but not least, and perhaps the most important thing, Nicole, is researchers have not done enough to rebuild broken trust.
Yeah.
That's true. That is true, right? Right. Like right here in St. Louis, you don't have to look too far for people to be like, man, WashU? Nah, right? Because it's unfortunately the case where a lot of times there are stories of like big old, brick and mortar universities and all their prestige kind of coming in, taking what they need and not leaving much for the community, right? Now, it's above my pay grade to know like what the president of the university is doing, but on my watch, that's not going to happen, right? So on the one hand, like, you said yourself, what I'm saying here does not necessarily reflect the views of like Wash, but I will also challenge WashU every day of the week to fricking do better, right? Do better. And I'll give you an example. Like earlier this year, like WashU wanted to give me this like impact award for community engagement. And I was like, well, listen, I want to actually engage this community group and I want to be able to have a contract with them whereby I give them some money in exchange, blah, 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 this quid pro quo arrangement. And there was some consideration about like, well, we don't know. And I'm like, listen, if you're not going to allow me to do that, you can take your award and you can keep it because I'm not about lip service. I'm about like actual results, right? So ultimately, then when you put people's feet to the fire, one of two things are going to happen. They're going to dig in and tell you to hit the bricks, which, that's a risk you run, or they're going to be like, oh yeah, actually you're right. We need to put our money where our mouth is, which is what I'm banking on. And here you go. So was I able to have that contract? I was. Did I get my award? Sure, just because they provided free dinner and it was nice and I like that, the awards or whatever. But perhaps most importantly, it's just one sort of thing that I might be able to do to affect change as it relates to rebuilding broken trust. That's important. That's like my call to action for all my colleagues is get your ass up out of your seat, right? Challenge your comfort by getting out into the community, going and meeting people where they're at and engage them, right? Like I'm losing patience, Nicole, when people are like, well, we just had a really hard time recruiting enough like Black or brown people into our study, let's say. I'm like, well, did you go to their community and maybe talk to like their community center there or the church or whatever? Well, no, like, I don't know if we're welcome. It's across town. I'm like, well, then your excuse is invalid because you didn't freaking try, man. Like, get up and challenge yourself and go try it, right? You owe it to the people. You owe it to the relationships that we're trying to mend, right? Because in doing so, we're all going to benefit for that. So
Well, I just want, yeah. Oh, keep going.
no, that's my pedestal. I'll hop down off my soapbox
No,
for a second.
I appreciate that you were there because I applaud you for making sure that you are utilizing the platform that you have and making sure your voice is heard because you are the voice of so many people that feel voiceless. And hopefully more people will follow suit and do the same thing because
Yes,
I just applaud you
yes.
there.
I
We
take
have
that,
so
well,
many different,
I take that
yeah.
extremely seriously, by the way. I take that very seriously. The platform, the responsibility of being in position to perhaps speak on behalf of other people, I always want to do justice for that. I always want my words to reflect what's actually being told to me and what's happening. And I take that extremely seriously. So any chance that I have, like, I hope folks know that I'm doing my absolute best. And that's not just like a one-off, sort of thing. Like, I take it extremely seriously.
It is definitely apparent. And I know that those attending right now can feel it. And so I just want to say thank you. Keep doing it because we need more people out there doing what you're doing right now. Okay, so we have quite a few questions that have come in. The 2019 HHS Best Practices Task Force report talked about one of the best practices is really multimodal care and getting away from like individual approaches and treating pain.
Yeah.
And one of the questions was, well, how do you study that? Is there more research and studies being done that are looking at sort of that multimodal approach?
So, no.
Okay.
And the reason being is because one, it's been studied enough and the evidence is actually pretty clear. That is the best way.
Okay.
Also, another reason why it's not being studied is also related to why you don't find more multimodal clinics out there. The money loser. It comes down to dollars. Unfortunately, here in America, with private insurance and so forth and so on, you're way more likely to walk into a pain clinic and ask, like, do you want an epidural? Right? Would you like some sort of intervention? Because the anesthesiologist, can bill for you and that time in the OR, and it's extremely lucrative. Never mind whether or not the evidence suggests it's actually beneficial. Maybe it is, maybe it ain't. Honestly, the data in my mind don't look that compelling, right? But here's the deal. Over the last 2 decades, as it relates to interventional pain management, those types of pain treatments have gone up exponentially. The amount of corresponding pain management has just stayed flat, right? So you have to ask yourself, those are being used so much, but the sort of return in terms of benefit doesn't look that great. But why? Because they're extremely lucrative, right? But to have a clinic that has like pain management specialist and a psychologist, physical therapy, occupational therapy, maybe a massage therapist, and acupuncture, that's what is required. That's multimodal treatment. It's the gold standard. It just isn't lucrative for a hospital, so they don't do it. It's a money loser, and it's freaking sad. And I don't necessarily know exactly what is going to happen to change it. It's going to require some amount of policy. And anybody on the call who pays attention to the news in this day and age recognizes that no matter how you vote, that landscape has got a lot of landmines in it right now, right? So are there ongoing studies on that topic? No, because in my mind, it's already pretty clear what should happen. But what isn't happening is it all comes down to the almighty dollar. I hate to be so doom and gloom about it, but I'll never blow smoke up your butt.
Smoke.
I'm going to tell you what it is.
I can tell now. Yes, I
Yeah.
like it. Be honest. Okay,
Yeah.
so I feel like we could talk for hours with the amount of questions that we're getting submitted right now and some other ones that we had. We're running out of time, so I'm going to go for 2 more questions. For those that we do not answer, I just want to share, we will get to them. We will answer them either in a follow-up article or make sure that we share them in a recap with the webinar so everybody has a chance to have their questions answered. But I
Yes.
want to give you the moment, just looking ahead, what are your top priorities for USASP over the next year or two?
So great question. I would say the biggest one, as the president of this sort of research association representing investigators across the country, is to do whatever can be done to ensure that there is funding to continue researching these topics that will ultimately translate into better pain care in the future, right? As I indicated, the vast majority of research is done using taxpayer dollars in the United States, right? And taxpayer dollars are, well, hopefully folks know how taxpayer dollars get appropriated or whatever. Those are acts of Congress and or executive. There's power differentials at play right now. But anyways, those are acts of Congress. So the point being is that, money has to be appropriated and it can be sort of allocated or put in different bins. My goal is to ensure that there's a substantial amount of money in one, just the overall research bin, because I think American healthcare and research therein is the responsibility of all Americans. So to a certain extent, like your taxpayer dollars need to go there. That's my personal opinion. You may or may not agree with it, and that's fine, totally fine. But to ensure that there is a sustainable, suitable amount of money for pain research moving forward, that's where I'm at right now. And some of this will be coming to fruition literally now to like the next couple of months. And then it's also continuing to advocate to ensure that all people with pain are represented in research, right? Because justice for all means all of us, right? So that being said, that's my own personal crusade. So that's also a big one too. And there's a lot of trials and tribulations and issues going on with that. I like to think that I'm the right person for the job. It's meaningful to me, but I've also been around the block, right? Like I see how a lot of these pitfalls are shaping up. So how do we navigate them to ensure that we come out on the other side better off for it in ways that we're all going to benefit?
Yes, that's a great response. All right, so to close out, for someone who's watching today who wants to contribute to pain research, but isn't sure where to begin, what would you tell them? Or what would be your final words that you just want to make sure that people hold on to from this conversation?
So sure. So I would say recognize that like we care, right? Like I care about you, right? I don't even necessarily know you yet. I'd love to get to know you, but I care and I think about you. I might not be able to put a specific face to a name, folks out there, but I care about you. My brothers and sisters, I love you and I don't want to see people suffering, right? So, granted, this is my job, but it's also a part of my calling. So if there is a pearly gates and I end up there someday and I'm asked, why do you deserve to walk past these gates? I'm going to say, because I cared about these people, right? And if that's not enough, then that's not enough, right? But my point being is that we care, right? So you want to get engaged, right? Reach out to these various foundations, whether that's USASP or US Pain Foundation, National Pain Advocacy Centers. Reach out to the different sort of networks that and ask, how do I get involved? And a lot of times things just happen organically. I can promise you 85% of the stuff I do on a day-to-day basis, I have no idea what I'm doing or like how to get it done. I'm just like, well, let me ask. And we start talking to people and things happen, right? So that's what I would encourage people to do, right? Like challenge yourself, right? You might be surprised with what you figure out and what you realize about yourself and others. And hopefully that will spark some joy. It will reinstate some faith in humanity, right? That's what I'm asking people to do. We don't see you as guinea pigs. We see you as people, and you're part of our team to help affect the outcomes and the change that we want to see in the world. Come join me. That's what I would say.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. We truly are grateful for not only just your time, but really your expertise, your perspective, and your candor. You are not holding back. You are making sure that the voices of people with pain are going to be heard and that they come first in everything that you are doing. And hopefully with all of that, we'll have a better future for all of us coming forward. I truly can't say it enough. Thank you for your commitment to equity, mentorship, and community partnership. It truly reflects hopefully what the future will look like for pain research as a whole. And then to everybody who is here today, I just want to say thank you again for being part of our November conversation. These discussions really matter because you're here, you're asking questions, you're sharing your own experiences, and you're really pushing for a new landscape in research that fully includes the people with lived experience or the people that are living with pain. For those of you that want to get involved, again, I know we have that QR code. Oh, perfect. Here is the QR code that you can utilize. Share what you're interested in with us. Let us know if you want us to contact you, either if we find out about a research opportunity nearby or how to become a patient partner in a new research opportunity in the future as well. We really want to make sure that this becomes a collaboration going forward and that each and every one of us has an opportunity to make sure that our voices are heard, that our experiences are understood, and that we are all part of the future of pain care going forward. So with that, I just want to close out again, Dr. Burel Goodin, thank you so much. We're grateful to have you with us. And until next time, everybody, please stay informed, stay empowered, and take care. Thank you,
Thank you.
guys. Thank
Appreciate
you.
that.
Yes,
All right.
take care.
Take care, all. Stay safe out there.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.